Hello, Kэрol. We are glad to meet you in Ukraine. What is the theme of the seminars you hold in Kiev?
The seminars we're having here are Pediatrics 1 for craniosacral therapy and craniosacral therapy for conception, pregnancy, and birth.
What did your professional way begin from?
I started out in birth, and I also started out in holistic health education and body therapies.
Could you tell us, how do you come to study craniosacral therapy?
A long time ago, I was doing referrals with another osteopath, and he told me about craniosacral therapy for my continuing ed license, and so I studied it and got excited and started doing it. That was 30 years ago.
Is symbiosis of craniosacral therapy and traditional medicine possible?
Yes, and we are already starting to see we're integrating it into many hospitals throughout the world. And we have research projects going on in 4 hospitals in the neonatal intensive care unit using craniosacral therapy and testing and researching it with great success.
And how craniosacral therapy can help with the conception?
With working with mom previously and with dad, helping their reproductive systems be in very good optimal working order, helping release stress from their system, and treating their membranes that surround the hormones so the hormones can communicate with the reproductive system. So it really enhances fertility.
You should answer with the full sentences without yes or no, and repeat the question a little bit because we will cut the video.
Okay, so you won't be in it.
What?
So they won't be hearing the question. I need to repeat the question.
Yeah, a little bit, or
All
touch
right.
it in your sentence.
I understand.
And how can craniosacral therapy help pregnant women? Is it possible to assist a craniosacral therapist in childbirth?
Craniosacral therapy can help pregnant women very well because we did a research project at a military hospital for 2.5 years using craniosacral therapy, and it gave moms a more optimal birth. It helped them be more comfortable with their birth. They got to communicate better with baby. It helped eliminate a lot of the stress and issues so that their pregnancy was really a wonderful experience, and their labor and delivery was more like a labor of love instead of a horror story.
Craniosacral therapy is only beginning to gain popularity in Ukraine. Tell us, how is the practice of a craniosacral specialist organized in the USA?
So in the USA, we have craniosacral therapists in all of the states, and they have to go through certification processes. And there are 2 levels. There's a technique certified and a diplomat certified. So as we're getting more and more doctors and medical establishments interested, they're happy to refer to craniosacral therapy, but they look to see if they're certified at techniques or diplomats level.
How often do pregnant women in the USA turn to craniosacral specialists to help?
We are getting more and more hospitals and midwives and obstetricians that are actually referring out to craniosacral therapy. So it is becoming more and more popular, and we are seeing people ask for it. Hospitals are calling and asking if we have someone that does craniosacral therapy.
Do women attend sessions after childbirth? How does craniosacral can help them during the period?
Craniosacral therapy postpartum is fantastic because it can help the moms be in better shape as they're recovering from the labor and delivery and the pregnancy, but it also helps their body be more balanced so that they don't get the postpartum blues or the postpartum depression that is very common. And so it helps them feel more connected to their child and happier.
What are the most common problems with newborn babies that craniosacral therapy can solve?
The most common challenges we see with newborn babies that are not in the NICU. We see a lot of challenges with latching on for breastfeeding and reflux, and so we are very successful in helping with breastfeeding, and we have a couple therapists in LA that are doing research on breastfeeding with craniosacral therapy and having wonderful success with releasing restrictions in the fat respiratory diaphragm, and also with working with the children so they don't have reflux, helping release a lot of the tension patterns that might accumulate during birth.
And do you remember some bright case when the results of treatment exceeded your expectations?
Yes, I do. I actually have had some really wonderful cases that I'm actually writing down finally and putting to paper in a book. But we've had a couple of cases where one mom, they said she wouldn't get pregnant. And so we were able to work with her fertility and work with her husband with craniosacral therapy. And they now have 2 lovely children. And they said she was infertile, so that was really wonderful.
And what is the most important achievement in your professional activity?
I would say the most important achievement in my professional activity is to follow my dream of helping more therapists help children come into the world in the most optimal way, because when they come in a more optimal way and they're more comfortable within their own bodies and they don't have all the strain and restriction from a difficult birth, then they can come and live the life they were meant to live without having to go back and get rid of all the stress and the restriction patterns from birth.
Share your memories of John Upledger. If you were familiar with him?
I was very fortunate, probably because I've been doing craniosacral for 30 years, but I got to have Dr. Upledger as an instructor multiple times, as well as work with him when I developed the obstetric program. I was working in a hospital, in a military hospital, and the commanding officer realized they were going to be sending a number of soldiers back to her hospital, and that 1 in 5 would have significant PTSD, and she needed to do something with it. So she asked me to call Dr. Upledger, and he did come out, and we worked with the soldiers, and we were able to help turn the PTSD around, the post-traumatic stress disorder, so that they could be happier, live their lives better, and it didn't have a trickle-down adverse effect on their families. And so that is when he saw what we were doing in the obstetrics department with craniosacral therapy. And so he and I worked very closely together and developing the craniosacral therapy for conception, pregnancy, and birth. And it was lovely to have him at my house, even playing my piano. And so I was very fortunate to get to meet him and learn a lot from him.
And what is the main advice would you give to women who want to grow healthy children?
I would say the best thing a woman who wants to have a healthy child is to start taking care of herself before conception, and ideally getting craniosacral therapy before conception or pregnancy helps their body be in the best place so that they can be best prepared for the most optimal birth and really have happy, healthy children. We're finding craniosacral therapy babies, children that have had craniosacral therapy, are more comfortable in their bodies and really become really wonderful human beings. So I really think it's a way that we're going to create a better planet by helping everybody get a good start with craniosacral therapy.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Thank you. My pleasure.